I think what we recognized is what the industry is dealing with right now, which is the very real divide still between understanding of and the skills associated with sort of traditional linear broadcast and more sort of digital ways of thinking and behaving. And so for the sake of the research, we partnered, hence the yin and the yang.
Exactly.
Right.
But I did, in one of my reports, 2.5, 3 years ago, I was getting a lot of the question after I was publishing that report. So who's going to, run TV in the future? Is it going to be digital or is it going to be traditional? And my answer was neither. Neither has the complete set of skills needed to, optimally take advantage of all the capabilities. It's going to be the people who can hold both of those ways of thinking in their brain simultaneously and navigate between them as appropriate for the brand, its goals, target audience, all those good things. And so that's, again, where as much as I've been in digital advertising for 25 years, particularly the programmatic space, has evolved after I've been really deep into that world. So, understanding the ins and outs of the of that space, no better partner.
Perfect example.
No better partner than Joanna.
What do you mean you can't just push a button and buy it? I don't understand what you mean by building a plan and then calling people.
And I'm sitting there going, this is so phenomenal. And like in a couple of hours, you've got a plan. You've looked at some alternatives. You know exactly what you want to do. You've just like cut about a month out of the process, minimum. Wow, this is fantastic.
I'm like, where's the button you push?
Where's the buy button?
Where's the platform? So that's what we wanted to look at, right? Yeah. And maybe just briefly in the why now, because I know we don't have a ton of time. It was things like, Jim's research clearly, we had reached a tipping point in marketers trying advanced forms of television, set-top box addressable, audience-driven, but it wasn't clear whether they were yet converging. So we wanted to look at that. Another clearly was platforms like The Trade Desk and others that were aggressively pursuing OTT and CTV. Saw it as a huge growth area. Reach, frequency talk, audience-driven planning talk, performance-based measurement talk and television were all up.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and it was also clear we've finally hit the point where the TV industry could no longer be in denial.
Yeah.
The TV industry is held out against technological changes, since the dawn of the internet. But with Nielsen ratings crashing, and it's clear people aren't like meditating in a corner somewhere, or they're not like going outside and taking a stroll. They are watching video. That something had to be done to figure out, how do we change what we're doing. So that we can capture those opportunities to get our brands in front of those people. But clearly, it's going to require pretty significant change in thinking about audiences, what data you use, the technology platforms that are going to support that, which is again sort of why now.
Maybe one final thing on the why now was the consumer experience question, because anybody who's experienced OTT advertising knows that for the most part it sucks right now because the ecosystem has not evolved in a way to make it a good experience for consumers for some fair reasons and some unfair reasons. But you also have this sort of ad load question in more traditional broadcast, which is also a problem because they're trying to figure out how to make money as ratings are crashing. So that is going to become a more and more urgent problem, the consumer experience problem. So for all those reasons, we did this new wave. What did we look at? We looked at kind of how to construct an audience, and thinking in terms that are more than just digital and more than just traditional. This notion of building a schedule, like a thing that just did not mean anything to me as a digital person, but was so valuable, I think, to linear broadcast buyers, right? Or planners, not buyers, because then there's also buying. Sort of how can I push a button and buy linear broadcast, set-top box addressable, OTT, CTV, and online video, or any combination therein, and how do they work together? And then from a measurement standpoint, the kind of classic, did it deliver? With the more kind of next gen, what was the impact?
Right. And that's where I think one of the things I was really interested and excited about was some of these tools that we looked at were a little more mature even than I expected them to be, in terms of not only sort of pulling data from the various ACR data sets and things like that, so you could have, a really nice, big sandbox to play in. But some very good thinking going into, we know that these data sets are skewed, and before we get ourselves in deep trouble, let's take a step back and start to think about how do we weight and balance and think about how to make them more representative so that when we do the plan comes out reaching the people we want to,
Right.
because that data set is representative. So some good thinking going on in
Yep.
there.
So finding number one,
Yeah.
in some ways more mature than we expected.
Yeah.
Especially on kind of audience construction, planning. Some of the cool things around portfolio management for, taking your upfront commitments and making them better and smarter
Yeah.
was really impressive.
Yeah.
The sort of nature of understanding a futures-based business and trying to balance it with a digital business. And that's probably finding number two, which is we found that the heritage of these companies played an enormously strong role in how they were thinking about it. So we had a sea of what I'm now calling peaches and plums.
Peaches and plums.
Peaches and plums, which are really, really different. But the hybrid of the two is the beautiful nectarine. And we found like 3 nectarines in a
Right.
sea of peaches and plums, which is to say,
Yeah.
the digital companies tended to be very, very, a little dismissive, quite frankly,
Yeah.
of kind of the world of linear broadcast, and sort of had this assumption that, well, we're setting up all the plugs and pipes for things like OTT, it'll work out. It's all just
Right.
going to look this way anyway in the future. And we were like, maybe, sort of. And then some of the traditional, I think, TV companies who were doing really cool things to sort of modernize TV did not
Right.
necessarily impress us with their acumen and more digital
Right.
thinking.
And they were kind of in the mode of, hey, TV is still a $70 billion business.
So,
And so, and they've built some nice tools to start moving away from just Nielsen audience into more advanced audiences and things like that. And they're kind of going, hey, I've got plenty of money I can make here. And okay, yeah, I'll get around to that OTT, CTV, and other things, Yeah, it's coming, so I'll get there eventually.
yeah.
But we were really looking for the nectarines.
The
I love
nectarines.
that. And again, my thesis, and I think Joanna agrees with me, is like that world where you need to have both of those mindsets, both of those perspectives, both of those ways of thinking that are necessary for some period of time, into the near future. There's again relatively few companies that are achieving what we felt was a really good balance of that, so that the outcome would be a strong plan, both from a traditional reach, frequency, GRP kind of delivery world, but then also was driving results in a way that would be more familiar to the digital world.
Yeah. Maybe another key finding was the sort of marketer aspirations versus what felt sometimes like agency realities, which is to say we would have conversations in our customer reference interviews with marketers who were, very sort of supportive of this idea. Like, yes, absolutely. We're calling it our holistic video strategy now. That's what we want to do. We want a holistic reach and frequency and measuring deeper performance. But 2 things. Thing one is that on the ground, the organizational structure that was set up to support that didn't support it at all.
Yeah.
Right? You'd have like a programmatic lead over here and the television investment team over here, and then these video people that did some direct deals that sort of competed with the programmatic people. It was messy organizationally. And then inside the agencies, you saw that too. We talked to some agency folks who were really kind of enlightened and thinking about this in really enlightened ways, in some cases on actual accounts, on actual business, in some cases in sort of more centralized roles. But a lot of the conversations just sort of felt like agency people sort of trapped in their day jobs and their swim lanes. Like, I need to just get it cheaper than last year. I'm paraphrasing slightly, but not entirely.
Slightly.
And that's a problem. That is legitimately, the sort of organizational stuff is becoming an urgent problem.
Right.
Because consumer behavior is changing so fast that this is becoming urgent.
Yeah, and that's quite frankly the reason why television didn't change for so long. There's so many interconnecting, interlocking, interdependent parts that no single part could move by itself. And so you had this kind of inertia. I was a geology major in college, so I used the plate tectonics, analogy, right? Where you've got these tremendous pressures building up under the surface of the Earth, but from the surface it doesn't look like anything's happening until one day, bang, California falls into the ocean, right? So we've hit that bang part right now, and it's, again, sort of the digital versus traditional perspective. I'm sure for the digital folks in this room, the fact that we're now, probably 4 years from the first, Turner Data Cloud and Viacom Vantage and all those things. And we're still, taking some baby steps toward it. But to those of us from the traditional world, it's like, oh my goodness, the world's like moving so fast. How do I keep up with it? So it's change.
So what are
we're getting the two sign.
What are some of the things we're watching? I would say.
Yeah.
Right.
Gee,
So
like maybe today, was there something worth?
yeah, like so.
thinking
For
about?
example, today there was some news. Did anyone catch the news today? Oh, that's right. Roku bought a DSP, guys. You're supposed to be like, holy shit.
Oh my God.
Whoa. Don't clap. I'm
Who
not
would
sure
have
if it's,
thunk?
Right. No, I'm not sure. I think probably it was good for Roku. It's unclear if it's good for anybody else as yet.
Yeah.
But clearly, like there is a lot of change happening, and it's happening pretty quickly. So we're watching things like that. Of course, we want to know what happens to these companies, these neat little companies that are doing really interesting things, like companies like I'm not supposed to Video Amp, just as an example, like kind of doing some neat things. Like where are those guys going to go? They're going to go somewhere, right? What happens to that stuff?
Yeah, and that's exactly why this was a new wave as opposed to the classic Forrester wave, because we do expect big changes
Totally.
in very short period of time, both in terms of these kinds of deals,
Yeah.
but just from the roadmaps that these companies were
Yeah.
describing. They've got a lot they want to accomplish
Yeah.
in a very short period of time, so it'll be really fascinating to see
Yeah.
how it develops.
Yeah, I mean, just briefly, a couple of things that are, I think, really interesting. Identity as sort of core to these conversations. I was at an event recently where a huge CPG marketer, when I asked her, do you want person or household? She was like, I need both. Like, that's the world I live in with the stuff that I sell. Don't make me choose. And so those are going to become, I think, much more important conversations around sort of who are we talking to and what's the right way to talk to them and at what level, right?
I mean, a few years ago, I was talking with Tracy Shapak, and we were debating the household person level thing. And again, sort of from that traditional standpoint, she's like, for God's sake, now I can only get into households 25 to 54. If I can get into households with pets, woohoo, I'm happy.
Right, exactly. But now it's like, oh wait, no, I want both. I want both. Like if I'm selling to diapering moms, I need something very different than if I'm selling toilet paper. And those are both inside the same company. And they need both of those things. They just do.
Right, and I think that's where, this idea of trying to hold both the traditional way of thinking and digital way of thinking, is really going to have to come together, because sometimes, and maybe with toilet paper, that adults.
Totally.
Well, actually, P2 plus.
Go
That's
mass.
all you need, right? But then something like diapering moms, there are, I think, 3.1 million diapering moms. So why do you need to reach 100 million households if you can do better than that?
That's right.
But again, from my background, it was, time to do a TV plan, 100 GRPs a week for 12 weeks, done.
By the way,
that ain't going to cut it
I want to
anymore.
note that was a literal marketer quote as well. You have said that to me. I went back and looked at our customer reference interviews. Somebody literally said that. He was like, it used to just be 80 to 100 GRPs, done. Like the rules, what happened? They don't work anymore. We need new rules.